Hello and welcome to the People Productivity Channel, a place where you can become a better you. In every episode, we have on guests where we share practices, thoughts, and things that hopefully spark some interest in you and help you think about how you can unlock your human potential. And whether you're a leader, an individual contributor, maybe you run a company, these lessons in these episodes are important and eye-opening, and I think you need to apply these as you think. Today, I have absolutely a great guest on, happens to be a friend, John Gillen. John is an industrial historian. He's an expert on the future of work. He's an expert on how technology is going to change it. It was interesting. I met John, actually. I was giving a talk on the future of work to an HR group a couple of years back. John came up right after that talk, introduced himself and said, we have a lot in common. Let's chat. And we got into an interesting discussion. That discussion led to him sharing some of his passions on the history of work. And he said, hey, have you ever been over to the Edisons Labs over in West Orange? And I said, honest to God, I've lived in Jersey for many, many years. I've never made it over there. We went over, great trip. I'm glad he was the one being the guide that day talking about everything, because he certainly did a better job than I think anybody who works there could possibly have done. It was amazing how intimate he is with this subject matter. So John, why don't you just share a little bit about yourself quickly, and then let's get in and talk about why the future matters.
Well, I'm honored to be here, Frank, and you for your invitation, and you're honored with your friendship as well. It's mutual. I feel in many ways we're like brothers from another time. So I just
I
really
think so.
enjoy my time and enthusiasm that we share on these things. So it's great. So I am an HR practitioner and longtime HR professional and HR human capital management consultant and work futurist. So I've always been interested and fascinated with work. That's the reason why I became a part of HR and always loved the history of work and what the place that work plays in people's lives. It's such a critical part in people's lives. When I was growing up in my own home, I remember there was a plaque on the wall. My parents never mentioned it, but it was just always there. It was in the family room, and it said, "Get your happiness out of your work, or you'll never know what happiness is." And while it was never mentioned, it was just such a presence there. I think it really had an impact in terms of my own psychology and my own thinking about, what is the place of work within our lives. So right now,
Interesting if every company had that plaque as people entered the company. Just imagine if the goal was actually for people to find happiness somehow in what they were doing in that company. But anyway, I've never seen that quote. I like it because it is very meaningful and very powerful.
and I thought it's what you're saying also is pertinent to this time. We are living in an exceptional time. I mean, every time is exceptional in its own ways, but there are certain times in history that we go through these revolutionary changes and a transition into new kinds of periods. And I think the World Economic Forum talks about this as the fourth industrial revolution, what is happening. And there are many different ways in which historians later will define what this is that we're going through. But it is important to understand that we are going through a particular time right now in which the world has changed. People understand and feel that it's changing, but don't always understand what it is and more importantly, how to take advantage of it as well. It's a great opportunities that are now more than ever in the history of the world. And I always speak to HR professionals and say how, and even job seekers or anyone interested in work issues and say, this is the most exciting time in the world to be an HR professional, most exciting time in the world to be an employee and a worker within the history of the world. And so we have to looking back at history is that we understand what working conditions were for people. And if you go to these industrial work sites like I do, and many unfortunately are well preserved and empty of any other visitors, and so you have time to spend at these places. It's no amusement park, and there are no lines on these places.
No, no.
And you have a lot
Your
of time.
research.
You have a lot of time to spend there, and in which you can almost hear, the ghosts of those workers who spent all their time, maybe 6 days a week, toiling there in mindless, backbreaking work. And it's very humbling, and also reminds us all of why we need to take advantage of the time we're living in, and to grasp on to the future, which is right in front of us. So, and for many of us, I mean, these are many grandparents. We have to think of it's not too long ago, a couple, two, three generations ago, where people who, the reason why we're here are forefathers and foremothers, that, the kinds of opportunities they had, and what they had to look forward to, was daunting. So, just going, there are some great mine tours in Pennsylvania, for example, here in the United States. And, you can go into mines and you can take the cars down. It's very heartbreaking is to think that people are spending all day long there. Your skin crawls after a few minutes in these places.
Just,
and,
just imagine as the sun rises, what you have to look forward to every day to get in that car, go down in that mine, to risk your life, in essence, and certainly putting your health at risk.
correct.
Black lung miner's disease was an unbelievable tragedy for so many families.
and,
And
and,
they did
and
that to provide for their families. These were rough lives. These were not simple times where people had it easy. These were rough times.
Yeah, and mine explosions and mine collapses, and there many injuries, and children working in the mine. I mean, it's just, so I just think these are important places to go, because when you leave, you think about what opportunities that we have and why we need to take advantage of it. So we're not in back-breaking times as much. We're going to be in mind-breaking times as much. That we have to really start thinking about work and our work lives in very different ways. And
So tell us more about that, because you say people should really think about the future.
well,
And
I think we all have to become work futurists. So your job, as it is now, is going to be very, very different for most vast majority of people. There will be certain jobs that will remain the same. That we've had jobs currently that have remained the same, that are, I wouldn't say ancient jobs, but there are still lots of farmers, a lot fewer, but still many people doing farmers. My grandfather was a farrier, who put blacksmith, essentially putting shoes on, horseshoes on horses. And in the state of New Jersey, I just looked recently, there are 5,000 registered farriers in the state of New Jersey. So these jobs still exist. And but many of the jobs that we currently have, most of them will remain the same in terms of a role, but the individual tasks and activities related to the job is going to change. So we'll continue to have doctors, we'll continue to have lawyers, we'll continue to have teachers, we'll continue to have HR professionals and finance and accounting people, but their roles and responsibilities are going to change dramatically, and in which, in some circumstances, it will be relatively unrecognizable, but relatively few jobs will actually, job titles per se, will be eliminated. Now, for example, I mean, it's been found that really since really relative recently, the only jobs that have really been eliminated in some ways that I used to say presentation was an elevator operator.
yeah,
And people in the New York metropolitan area corrected me that,
there are
you
some.
know, with certain, Orthodox Jewish communities, on, for the Sabbath, there are still elevator operators who operate elevators. So
And there's some old high-end buildings where it's kind of chic to have an elevator operator, right?
correct.
You can
And
still find
and
those.
for many reasons, the elevator operator as a job, which is also interesting part of it, is that the reason why the the elevator did not need an operator, for many years, but people were afraid of going into elevators
Mhm.
without a human person operating it. So it is really about the fear of change within humans that is really the issue that we have with the future of work. It's the fear of the future work, which is the biggest impediment to the future work, and that fear gets translated into politics and gets into issues regarding uh, organizations and groups and vested interests who will seek to stop the changes that will benefit maybe the vast majority of people. So that's what happens. The resistance to the change will be fierce, but anytime you with Edison or Henry Ford or any of the great inventors, you will, as you read about their biographies and you understand the history of innovation, you will understand the tremendous resistance and pressure that they faced in pushing forward their ideas, and that they knew in their minds were going to change the future of the world and was going to make the world a better place. But boy, and they fought hard, and they took a lot of hits and a lot of resistance from the people at the time for what was happening.
It
So
is, it's a famous cliche, pioneers take all the arrows. And, that is a perfect example. When you're threatening the status quo in any way, you get tremendous amount of resistance. Humans don't want their cheese moved.
mhm.
And,
I think,
I always feel that we're at a time where people need to think about moving their own cheese. They just have to.
and the cheese is going to move even if they don't want to move their cheese. So
Right.
there, I think one of the things about a word futurist. I mean, I know I spent a lot of time, obviously, about the digital revolution issues, digital and technologies and societies and changes and responses. And because you need to look at it holistically because it does affect everything, not just it's not just about the technology. More important is all the people systems related to the political systems, the social systems, the
Yeah.
economic systems, all the other educational systems, everything, all the other systems that are impacted by that, and also all these systems that were put in place really to protect or serve a different world. So
Let's talk
they.
because this obviously has huge implications for people in those existing systems like education that are going to see revolutionary change.
All systems are going to see revolutionary change because all systems were created to address, a different world in many ways. So they were created. Most of the systems that we have were created around an industrial model. So as we transition to a digital model, these things aren't working anymore. So one of the reasons why, for example, education, our public school education, were really established to train farmers' children, who were used to working on farms to quote unquote go to work. They never had to go to work before, so they had to go to school and to sit in schools that very much modeled industrial factories at the time that were, whether it's sewing machines, the way the desks are set up. You look at pictures of the way people worked and were supervised in old factory settings, and you look at school systems now and a regular
Like,
classroom any
like
time, and
same
it's
thing.
very similar. Exactly right.
Eerily similar. And that is the advantage of going back like you do to look at the past and go to the actual places where the people working, whether they were in these old factories or these mines, to study the history, because that image of the people all sitting there at their desks doing something is strikingly similar to what education, became.
Correct. And my wife's a public school teacher, and so I mean, when I go visit the school, it's jarring, to me as an
Yeah.
alien. uh, when bells ring at the end of the day, almost like the 5 o'clock whistle, and then
Oh yeah.
everyone leaves and it's ends. I mean, so work doesn't end like that anymore. We're not tied, and we don't go to work anymore. Work is no longer a place we go to. Work is something that we do. So all these are going to have imports and impacts on all of our systems. So that's just the educational system. But we have to look at same thing. We're going to doctors' offices, or to go to a doctor's office and there's fax machines. It's just jarring in my mind,
Yeah, me too.
antiquated the paper forms or how antiquated these systems are. And
Well, it's all
so
industrial, right? I mean, when you look at the doctor's office, you're basically this physical thing where one of your parts isn't working and we're going to come in and analyze it. They don't even look at anything holistically. So all of it is based on some industrial metaphor. And I love school because the entire thing is, hey, look, you're a part, you're coming into kindergarten, and this part is going to go through a series of stages or steps till it comes out the other end. And every part is going to go through the exact same process, even though all the parts entering school have different aptitudes, skills, wants, desires, and needs. Doesn't matter. You're going down this assembly line. Your life is mapped out from the day you're born to the day you graduate from college. And we're going to produce X number of these, size 5 red shoes, whether people want them or not.
correct. And that is essentially what is happening in the economy, that schools are producing products
Yeah,
that, whether or not the work world wants them or not.
that's right.
So, uh,
Because
and again, it's a mass production model. It's not an individualized. If we talk about it, one of the things that digital enables is an individualizing products, and that you can design product. But all these systems are not capable in a way in which they are structured to be able to uh, accommodate that, what is happening. So, or what the capabilities of these
yeah.
and the infinitesimal options that are now available for many times you can just go online and just design your own product
Oh,
essentially.
absolutely. Just imagine we're entering an era where there will not be such a thing as size. You will
Correct.
basically, everything will be digitally built and designed to your exact specification. So if you're a size 9 and 0.75 shoe, that's what's going to come out because they're going to have a 3D casting of your size.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And so if you think about a 3D casting of your shoe, well, what about the customization of education? So, and these are the kinds of things that are going to be very disruptive to the status
Radical.
quo. So anything that is
Radical.
a system, it's a healthcare system, an educational system, a political system, religious systems, all the denominations within the United States are facing the same kinds of declines, regardless of how conservative or progressive that they are. They're all different challenges that are happening with it. But part of it is that they are, again, these are, I won't say industrialized religions, but they are having a hard time adjusting to a new world that is looking for different formats
Oh, yeah.
and ways of individualized, expression. Which it
Well,
this
they
is
were. I would say take, I went to Catholic school, grew up in that system. And, if you want to talk about command and control and a complete hierarchical system, which is very much the old world that is being broken down as, power begins to move to the people who are smaller, faster, and can meet individual needs or maybe the needs of their constituents or parishioners. This is what's going to change. That command and control is so slow. They're not going to evolve. And so if everything around them is evolving, they're de-evolving into something that's of no value, you know.
I will say there are a lot of times about times of change like this. There are paradoxes as well. One of the things if about the Roman Catholic Church, which is since this is an organization that has gone through many kinds of revolutions, agricultural, industrial, even the digital today. One of the ways in which it is a model organization of the future, ironically, is the fact that an organization of over a billion members has only 5 levels of management.
Hmm.
So there are ways in which how do you universalize something and individualize it as well. And so how do you use the trends and the issues that the opportunities that there are in the new age to create something new. I mean, there are a lot more online communities and a lot of ways in which people are worshiping online,
Yeah.
and new kinds of communities. The sense of community is going to become more and more important, ironically. So as much as we get individualized, what places of work, I don't believe in the future is going to be, I don't think any quote unquote, you're not work at all is going to happen at work. Work is going to become more like churches in terms of community centers where the workforce will come together in community.
Hmm.
So it would almost be, as it is Sunday for church, it is going to be Fridays for work, that people will come together in a sense of a community aspect. And that just as people can't, very difficult to practice religion alone, that people need to come together in a community to be with other believers and other people who could support in a sense of a shared mission that they have. So I think workplaces are become more and more, the desks will go away and or the individualized workstations will go away, and there'll be more and more group settings for what work, and work won't take place at work. We're going to go back to cottage industries.
Yeah.
Work used, before the Industrial Revolution, work used to take place at home, and fathers were in the home all day long with their children. And then you learned work from fathers and mothers who were there in the household with you all
Yep.
day long. And so we have, what we have done, we've taken parents out of the home where there was no sense, and then we talk about work life balance, where really in the pre-industrial revolution there was a lot of work, but the work was family work. The work was always done as a family and as a family unit.
Oh,
So in some ways, the industrialization of work has in some ways broken up families. So people have said it is created systems that would support families, but there are positives and benefits of both. And I think just that's the way we have to see it. So there are a lot of things about the old world that are very positive to try to preserve, but not preserving the forms of the old world. So
yeah.
the
Yeah.
values, the things that were the solutions that were created, the important things, but it's the forms that are going to change, not the essences of what these institutions are about themselves.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, and we are going back to the future in some ways. I see an era of it's collective craftsmanship
Yes.
where individuals toiled alone. Now they'll go to work for the sense of community. They'll be building something together. It'll be technology based, whatever, whether it's 3D printing or some other technology that they can use to create things. They're going to be created. And, the old craft shops in the 1700s, 90% of the people were on the farm, but you still had craft shops. And
Yeah.
these craft shops were very, very informal. The modern notion of a company didn't exist.
Mhm.
There was much, better work life, balance, I think, in these little craft shops. People got together, was informal. So we're heading back to a time that maybe more resembles that in some ways.
Yes, and Back to the Future, I think, is very apropos here because as they say, which is one of the reasons why I think any good futurist, in my mind, is a historian, because uh, as they say, history does not repeat itself, but it rhymes.
Hmm.
And so the lessons to understand what's going to happen in the future, I spent a lot of time in the past because, and especially during these inflection points that we've had in the past before, whether it was at the beginning of the 20th century when you had people like Thomas Alva Edison and Henry Ford and Firestone. There was a lot of things happening at that time. I mean, I think if we look back at the beginning of the 20th century, and imagine how revolutionary electricity,
Incredible. Exciting.
how revolutionary automobiles were. I mean, we just have no idea of sometimes think that we've the only generation has had to go through a lot of change or facing daunting kind of changes. But there are been other inflection points in history where the changes were dramatic, and the transition from the agricultural to the industrial world was brutal. So anything reading about mid 19th century England was just, brutal. I mean, going from farm life, as difficult that was, into the factories and into the mines. Uh, I understand that it's
Humanizing.
progress for us, but in terms of working lives, the conditions were brutal. So um, I, it's sobering, enlightening, humbling, and inspiring all at the same time. These places, so I get a
Yeah.
lot of inspiration from these places of the past.
And like you say, history, history sets the stage because things do rhyme. And when we went over to tour, Edison's labs over in West Orange, I mean, that is just an amazing place. And to think that was really the first real innovation labs in the country.
Yes, I mean,
Amazing.
so we think of Edison, and there's a new book out by Edmund Morris, so hopefully Edison will get a little more attention right now. And the along with Tesla and Westinghouse and these titans of the time who created the worlds in which we are living in now to this day. But Edison, besides the electric light bulb, and actually he did not invent it, he really perfected it. And but he also created, almost more importantly, was the electrical system
Yeah.
created with it, though direct current, and was Tesla's alternating current that won, through George Westinghouse, but Edison was very instrumental in the invention, in many ways, of perfecting also the telephone, and he was, and the phonograph, and the movie.
Edison invented the word hello.
Yes,
That's a
and
fascinating story that, you learn when you go up to the Edison Labs.
but they will say, Edison historians will say, his greatest contribution of all his great contributions was his research and development methodologies and the way of creating the future. So we are still, that's a legacy today that we all have and share and benefit from. His Edison's Labs, first one really at Menlo Park, New Jersey, which you can be seen out at Dearborn Village. Henry Ford picked up all the original buildings from Menlo Park and brought them out to preserve them out to Dearborn, Michigan, which is a
Maybe.
testament to both Ford and a testament to Edison.
Well, and their relationship that he would do that.
Correct. And Ford actually was worked for, quote unquote, the old man, Edison at one time. And Ford was an employee of the Edison companies when
That's
Edison
amazing.
was a very large, even then at time, a very large organization. And Henry Ford, eventually had an opportunity to meet, Edison himself, and from that they developed a lifelong friendship. And actually, down in Fort Myers, Florida, you can see the houses right next to each other where Edison and Ford built his house, his summer home, right next to Edison, essentially on the same property. So it's again, just you can't make up, these things of history. So that's really, we're living in again these same times. We have an opportunity to create our world, and Edison was creating a world, and so was Ford creating a world, and we individually have opportunities to create a world. We
Yeah.
understand so much more about the way to create, a new world that would hopefully be better for all of us. And
So
it's
every individual should be inspired that they happen to be here at a moment in time where they can not just shape and touch their own future and begin to set a new path forward, but that they can perhaps even contribute to the shape of the future in general. Because these individuals have done it. So many over time, have had ideas and taken them forward. And it always took a lot of passion and spirit and fire to persevere and stick with it, but they did it. So, individuals, let's talk about that because, people really should listen to this and be inspired to think about where they're going, right? Because things are changing and whatever system they're in, whatever job they're in, it is going to be impacted. and
Hmm.
they could actually act or be acted upon, as an old boss of mine used to say years ago. So what
Hmm.
do what do you think people should be doing? I mean,
Well, one of the great quotes about this is the best way to predict the future is to create it. So you can create your own future, and you should be thinking about creating your own future. And a lot of the institutions that we look to, quote unquote, protect us, such as professions, are going to lose their ability to protect their own members. So, YouTube and things like YouTube and social media and the amount of information, there's no longer going to be this knowledge that is able to be locked up by professions and hidden from the general point of view or not be accessible. Essentially, going back to the Catholic Church, I mean, it's losing the ability. At one time, only the priests were able to read and speak Latin as a coded language. So what is happening now with the professions have had a lot of coded language and
Mhm.
have secret
Same thing.
knowledge, and that they are going to be falling by the wayside. And we're living in a time where people's individual experiences are going to be more important than their credentials. So their authority is going to be based on their own individual experiences, that is going to be, and their creativity,
And their track record, which will be public.
correct, which will be more and more human and individualistic, and will enable and require the fuller contribution of all human beings. So it's a great time. The future, before we talked about or mentioned great interest in robotic process automation. And one of the great things about robots, or the fear of it, is that the robots actually make work more human. And as they say, that the robots don't take the human out of the work, the robots take the robot out of the work. And what is left is only the human work, the creativity, the communication, the caring, all the big C's, as I say.
Hmm.
And those are the things in which we have to help people to become. Education hopefully will help people become more human, help people with their emotional intelligence and
An
and the
enormous
way
gap.
in which they can interact with their fellow workers so that can be creative and collaborative, because collaboration is what it is, and many people are stunted emotionally in their ability to collaborate because of their own
Well, the
child
educational system.
experiences or and ways in which that they have not been able to develop, emotionally. So we have we've focused on the Industrial Revolution, focused a lot on our intellectual intelligence and facts, and which now can be found in Google. So a lot of the knowledge that has been only accessible and trying to educate people and to provide them with facts that they could keep in their minds, we now have Google to take the place of. So when Google's there for all the facts and figures, then what is left is the human dimensions, which are what the future work is going to be, which is going to be more human. The question is, the challenge is, are we as a human species and societies able and willing to focus on those things that the Industrial Revolution de-emphasized? Because in the Industrial Revolution, the model was the machine. And so what we did is we created everyone into a machine, and we de-emphasized those other parts and aspects of the human being, of the human worker, which we now are important. So everyone wants creative skills. Everyone wants creativity. The job descriptions and job requirements are changing. People
Oh, they're
want
human.
communication.
Resilience. Resilience is not a robot. That is a human phenomenon. The ability to be agile is a very, very human phenomenon. To create things from nothing is very human. To come together, decision making and problem solving, everything It is the
And
rehumanization of work and life. And I see this as one of the great moments in time where, the school system dehumanized everybody. It took individuals, said it's all about facts, it said it's all about individual accomplishment. Now we're heading into a world of group accomplishment where caring, concern for one another, the growth of the human element, this is what's going to really create greatness and bring people together to create things that didn't exist before. And the world of school, which taught people to think but not to feel, is going away. And schools have to bring that human element back, like you say, John, to allow that spark to actually come back to life in everybody.
I think there's a lot. I think many of people within the educational community are aware of this, and there's a lot of exciting things happening. But I do think what's going to happen is that we are going to go again. We need to start going back again. Why history is important to look at pre-industrial models of even education. And one of the things I think is going to happen in education, which is we are going to go back to, since the future work is going to be more human, we are going to go back to the humanities as an educational foundation for people.
Yes.
And we professionalized education with all these professional schools, which are not going to be necessary anymore. So everyone needs to get an education in how to think and how to learn and how to problem solve and how to collaborate. But the technical skills that we have emphasized, unfortunately, in education since the end of the Second World War, really, those kinds of skills are no longer going. The education, we no longer have 4 years of time to luxury of learning those kinds of skills. Those things will be learned on the job and on the
Learned on the
fly
job.
and on the YouTube. And those skills will have a very short half-life. What we need to prepare people for is lifetime learning and problem solving and creativity and communication and collaboration, so that and come out of school knowing nothing technical other than their ability to learn technical skills that are continuing to change.
Yeah.
So it's that is going to be revolutionary for higher education, and it needs to go down to primary and secondary schools as well. It's everything will change.
Every
So and it, it's going to be a more human world if we allow it to be.
Yeah, and I think that's just a great note to close on. We're heading into a more human world. People should find their passion, pursue their passion. That's the energy that's going to drive them forward so that they can continuously learn, transform, and change. Because, find what you love and never work a day in your life. It's almost, I guess, similar in a note to the sign that your parents had hanging in the house, which may very well be the prediction of the future, right? Be happy at what you do because it's really going to matter in terms of your overall success. Any parting thoughts for our audience here?
Well, I do think that the work needs to be seen as some people have said work is love in action. So Kierkegaard said that in The Prophet. And so I think that we need to see work more as an opportunity for service and an opportunity of creating opportunities of products and services of service to humans in the more human world. So,
So,
um,
fabulous way to end. Work is love in action, John. I thank you so much for coming on. Fascinating interview. You found your passion. You're so good at what you do, and so curious about the history of work and what does that mean for us today. So thank you for sharing your thoughts with everyone. We'll have to have you back on. This was a great interview. Hey, all the best. Take care.
thanks, Frank.
Yep.